Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today we're back with Ralph Serna in California to resume talking about his running career, the interactions with other people, and his career as a shoe designer. Welcome back today, Ralph Serna. Hi, Ralph.
Matthew, great to be back again. Thank you.
Let's just pick it up again in university, a little bit about what it was like with Steve Scott, training and his explosive improvement over the time he was at UC Irvine. What were you seeing then, and what was it like training at that level at the high mileage?
As you know, I was a low high school mileage runner. My coaches had done that deliberately so that by the time I got to college, I had room for growth. That was the plan from day one, since I was 15 when I got my coach that I would stay with through high school. Irvine, immediately, we started running 80, 90 miles in the fall of 75 when I joined the team. And Coach Len Miller had a rule that we had to run a 2.25 mile run. And I can't remember what the time was. I'm going to throw out a time of something like 10:40, 10:50 for 2.25 miles on the track the first day back to make the team, just to make the squad, not even the varsity team. If you don't make that time, no matter who you are, you'd get cut. So that was the deal. That was my initiation the first day at UC Irvine on the track in August of 75. Steve had run, I believe, about a 4:05 mile his freshman year. He was 1 year ahead of me. So I come in knowing that he was not a half miler in high school. He got second in the state in 1974 for California. But he had run 151, 152. So he's the kind of prime guy that's going to move up in college to the mile. He was normally our third or fourth guy in cross country as we start the season. Brian Hunsaker and I became roommates. Brian was my rival in high school. He beat both Tom Hunt and I at Arcadia 2 mile, but Tom and I had to run the mile. But Brian ran a legit 8:58. Was one of the fastest in the nation in April. And eventually he became my roommate at UC Irvine. So he and I were normally the lead of our team. The first time we actually got a race, not just a time trial, but a race to make the varsity, Len put us into a 10K road race in August of 75 and basically said top 7 of our team is going to be the varsity and the rest will be supporting. So that's what we did, and Brian and I tied for first, and it became a regular thing. Brian and I always tying it and going back and forth. The mileage was going up. Keep in mind that we had Steve Scott. We were still Division II. He won the Division II NCAA 1500 his freshman year, so he was legit. We had other guys who had run 4:15 in high school, and a couple of half milers that maybe had run 151, 152, 155-ish. So we had a good, fast team. Every workout was hard. Len started pushing the mileage up. Steve was probably maybe third, fourth, fifth guy, and that would fluctuate. But Brian and I are always the top 2 guys tying normally in the races. As the mileage went up, the intensity went up. We found ourselves for the next 4 years of my college career running workouts such as 10 by 1 mile with maybe a 5-minute rest in between, 4 or 5 minutes, or 20 repeat 880s on a grass field. And these workouts would take forever. We would do even a 3 repeat 3 miles. So my intervals started getting longer and bigger in volume from the high school that I was used to. And maybe it was the second or third year. Eric was there. He came in a year after me, and we're running these 10 repeat miles. And I seem to remember that we averaged about a 4:32 And it was on a course around like the baseball field, around the track, a big grass field. So it's more of like a road race mile. But Len measured it out with his wheel. I think we averaged 432. I remember my last mile, I ran 419, and Steve just ran away from me. And he probably ran like 415. I knew immediately, it's like, okay, come track season, this is going to be awesome. It's going to be someone to train with at that level. That's how the first year went. And we finally got to a meet prior to NC2A. It was called the Biola Invitational. And it was pretty prestigious on the West Coast because Tom Wysocki was running for Reno and Nevada. And he had another teammate named Domingo Tipaduiza. And I believe Domingo was Colombian. And he and his brother were on the team with Tom. And so they had some really good people like that would show up. And of course, Tom later develops even beyond that and does quite well even in the Olympic trials in the 10,000. So we were racing against those guys. But the Biola Invitational was our final test because Len, the entire season, was telling everyone that, UC Irvine is going to win the Division II cross country title. And the year before, no one even knew who UC Irvine was. Maybe our top runner might have been either Steve or John Koenig or Bob Tillman. But they were like 30, 40, 50th. So no one took Len seriously. Yet he was pushing us in all these miles, running us hard, and then finally started tapering off at the end. I got through the first season without any injuries. I didn't get injured till my junior year, but we were running mileage of up to like maybe 130 miles a week.
Wow. How often were the full interval sessions? Like my college, we did Mondays and Wednesdays, and our intervals were 5-6 miles of intervals.
Yeah, we normally say we had an invitational. We only had, I think, maybe one dual meet my entire career at UC Irvine. Everything else, like most times for most colleges, were invitational. So call it a Saturday, and that even was like maybe every other Saturday. So we would have at least 2 really hard workouts on a week. On race week, you might have it earlier or back it off a little bit on that second one. But say call it 2, and then we were supposed to be running morning runs on our own. So we didn't have an official team workout in the mornings. Other than the first couple of weeks when we reported in August before school started, we all came into a camp. And what Len would do, even though we were still in Irvine, Len would get families, either of alumni or people that he knew, that would house us. So even if you live 5 miles away, he wanted you to be with the team at staying somewhere else, not at your own house. So that worked out great.
And yeah, about the morning runs, were they slow, conversational speed?
Len put it to us to do our own without him around. Most of it was like 6 miles in the morning. Yeah. Easy, just stretching the legs out, nothing ever hard in the morning runs on our own. Normally, John Koenig and I would get together, or Brian and I, because since we were roommates, it would be easy for us just to get out the door together and just get a quick little 6-mile run. A jog then was like 6-minute pace, but that's what we do. So the morning runs were just on our own and easy.
Now you're going through the season, and what's the run up to nationals?
Biola was the final test. And in the beginning, since day one when I got there, Len was saying NC2As. And even the year before when he was recruiting me, he said, we're going to win NC2A track and cross country. No one took him seriously. Irvine's not a powerhouse. Len took over my freshman year as head coach in track because Bill Toomey was actually the head coach prior to me getting there. Wow. And Len was always in charge of the cross country team for a couple of years because he was only there a few years before I got there, but he took over both track and cross country by the time I got there. And Bill Toomey was still around. And that first cross country training camp that I stayed with someone, I actually stayed at Bill Toomey's house with a couple other guys in his guest pool house in the back because he lived right there by Irvine. I believe he was like in Corona Del Mar or something like that. But I stayed at Bill and Mary, his wife, Mary Rand, famous long jumper from the Olympics from England. And she was there, and they were super nice. And I just remember one morning getting up and they invited us to come into the house for breakfast. And I looked down on this glass shelf table, and underneath the glass were these Olympic medals, like just there. And I was amazed just looking at hers and his. So that was pretty cool.
That is. Okay. How far after Viola to nationals?
It was only about 2 weeks. Viola was here in a city called La Mirada, not too far, a little bit inland, but it's in the southern part of LA County. We ran there and we did quite well. So to win that was a good feather in the cap, and certainly gave more credence to the fact that we were going to be a challenger. I think the race was like November 16th or 15th of 75 for NC2As. The reality was that this meet was hosted on the West Coast, and they rotated, but most of it was in the Midwest. But this one was actually Northridge's host meet on the West Coast as NC2A. And somehow the head coach of Northridge and Len spoke, and Len convinced him to have it basically in our backyard in Newport Beach. And that was part of our workouts. Whenever we do an 8 or 10 mile run, we'd always run to Back Bay, Newport Beach. It was the next city from Irvine, only a mile away. So somehow we ended up being in our backyard, even though we weren't the host. And again, that race was on a golf course like most are. We stayed in the hotel near there. Coach wanted us all to be close, and we were able, like everyone else, to jog the course the day before. It was a great day, great weather for us. It was easy. And Len had said that he thought, he was positive we were going to win the NC2As. And Southwest Missouri, I believe, had either won the year before or second, and they were favored to win as their number one runner. Dan Dwyer was his name. Dan Dwyer, Southwest, was the favorite to win because I believe he got second individually. Ron Tabb was there as well. There were quite a lot of good runners who eventually even got better and better. And as the race went on, Brian and I got into the lead, and it was going to be Brian and I and see how long we could stick together. And we knew we had these other people that had come from the Midwest that we had never run against, really. We'd run against some of the Northridge guys. Ed Chavez was one of the guys from Northridge, quite legit. And we all went out as a pack. When Brian was there and I was there, and Dan Dwyer was there. And I just remember that we had spoken individually with Coach as well for a game plan. This is the 5 mile race that year. And he just said that he wanted me to stick with the pack, don't need to take the lead, but somewhere with a mile or a mile and a half, move up. And if I was feeling good at a mile to go, just make a move and go. And that's what I did. I didn't look back. I just remember I just kept going. And by the time I got to the finish line, I won that race, and I won by 10 seconds over Dan Dwyer. And later I remember reading an article that Dan Dwyer said he thought I would come back because he didn't think I had a kick. And I'm thinking, wow, that's strange, because I was like the fastest high school miler coming in. So I was surprised he thought I didn't have a kick. And
yeah, he read that article about your bad junior year.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. And so he believed that. But he was a really nice guy, and we joked about it. And then Steve had an amazing race. Brian was really going to be our second placer, and I thought he was going to be right with me because we had tied through all the other meets during the season. Steve had an out of his head race and probably sprinted past in the last 100 yards another 20 or 30 guys. He finished fourth, which is crazy. He wasn't the top guy this season before, I don't believe. And then Brian got 11, and then the others came through. We had a big come through by a guy named Robert Slick. Robert Slick was actually at Cal State Fullerton, where Mark Covert won with the national team there years before. But because Cal State had dropped their program, Robert was able to transfer into UC Irvine without having to redshirt.
Wow.
And he was a year ahead of me. So he ended up being our fourth guy, which was amazing. Then Ed Allmeyer came through. And then we had John Koenig. We had Bob Tillman. It's amazing that we won the NCAAs with only 2 freshmen and 5 sophomores. So all of a sudden we win this thing and no one could believe it.
Did anything change You guys are now, apart from your coach talking, you're on the map. Everybody's got to be thinking you're going to win it again.
Yeah. Then, of course, we get Eric the next year, and we're only getting stronger. The workouts are getting crazier, and the talent is just rising. Brian Hunsaker decided that the program wasn't for him, so he transferred out his sophomore year and would eventually go to San Diego State and run against us. And we're still great friends, and to this day, still talk to Brian. So we're still great friends. He left, but Eric came in, and along with Eric came Don Moses. Don Moses had beaten Eric once or twice in high school, I believe at one of the indoor meets when he and Tom Hunt beat Eric, and then again at the prestigious Mount Sac Invitational. Both Tom and Don beat Eric, I think, there as well. So Don was right there with us, and he had run 4:08 in high school. So now here we go again. So we just added 2 high school kids who had run 4:08 and 4:09, and one had to run 8:44 in the 2 mile. The other, Don, I believe, ran 8:52, 8:53. So we just got stronger. And then, of course, the guys who were there even prior to me, being Steve, John Koenig, Ed Allmeyer, Robert Slick, everyone was getting faster. Everyone was getting stronger. The workouts became more and more intense. Steve started becoming Steve Scott that we know. His major breakthrough, not only the cross country thing, because Steve never considered himself a long distance runner, and even admits he did not like to run the workouts, but he saw what we could do. And I think that's what led to the fall before he ran his first sub 4-minute mile indoors within a year or two. He saw the benefits and was as much of a team player as anyone I've ever seen. He would always seem to have his best performances when the team needed him to, as his 4th position showed.
Yeah. When you were there as a freshman, Eric had already committed before you even went. What about recruiting? Were there any people who came to visit that you guys met with that maybe didn't join the program or did? Was Moses part of that? Did you know him before?
I knew him from racing against him in high school, yes. We knew each other as competitors. He lived in La Crescenta. I was in Anaheim. So it's a bit of a distance. I wouldn't say we're close friends to hang out and go for a run on the weekends or anything like that. No, we weren't that close in high school. Eric and I had been roommates at one of the junior meets when we ran against the Russians in 74. So I got to know him pretty well. But Don had come in, so I knew who he was. He knew me, and we were able to speak about things. One of the few people that didn't come was Armando Sendejas. Was at a junior college. Armando beat me at one of the large championship meets here, and he had run basically 9 flat. He went to a junior college with my old high school teammate, Jose Saavedra, who had run 9:11 and 4:18 in high school right with me. They both went there, and they met another runner, half miler named Phil Wingard. The 3 of them were the powerhouse of Fullerton Junior College team that battled with Coach Larson's cross-country teams and track teams, which were monsters. They could easily step into UC Irvine and help and be part of the team, if not leading the team. So those guys, Armando, Jose, Phil, came, and they're 3 of the guys who actually decided not to come. They ended up going to Long Beach State, which has a big history, and they became some of our rivals for PC2A meets and things like that prior to NC2As. The only other one was Robert Angel, who I'd mentioned previously, had beaten me our sophomore years, and he had set the indoor 2-mile record, and he decided to go elsewhere. I think he went to Indiana. Those are a few of the guys, but other than those guys, everyone else that came for a recruitment trip or that Len had spoken to joined us.
We talked about the Eric Hulse issue with the slow run, that he didn't make the cut, and then he came back and had to dismiss himself. He knew he didn't have it then. Your relationship with him through the end, how was that when running doesn't bring you together day after day? There's a split there.
Yeah. Eric and I had a really good relationship. Eric was quite religious. And so I would bet my life on the fact that if someone asked me, who's the only person you know has never drank alcohol or smoked, immediately my hand would go up and say Eric. That just wasn't Eric, but he was great to be around. He was funny. And I know one of his things was ice cream, and he always had ice cream. He loved ice cream. And that's just one of those funny things I remembered about him. Always really nice, always respectful, but he was like a straight shooter. He would tell you exactly what he thought. He wouldn't hold back. So he was just a really good sounding board to have on the team. He was also an artist because he would do stained glass and later became very serious with the stained glass art. So we would take art classes together because I was a fine arts major. We graduated with that. And Eric would be in some of my classes. So we stayed in contact even through classes when he wasn't on the team working out with us as much.
That's great. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about what happened with your injury and the course of that in your junior year.
By my junior year, we had won the second NCAA cross-country title.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that race itself, too, because that's interesting.
I have a funny side story on that. We were pretty much favorites to win again. We lost Brian, but we gained Eric and we gained Don Moses. So we're only better and stronger now. It was in Springfield, where I think it had been 2 years prior. We're there and we're favorites now. Dan Dwyer's gone. He was a senior my freshman year. So is the host of other people that Pete Heeson is now running against us.
Yeah.
Like that Ron Tabb is running against us. We had guys like Angel Martinez from UC Davis who are passed with cross later in business and guys like that. There was a whole slew of people. Being the favorites, we were in prime condition. Eric was running well. I was running well. We had another strong season of tough workouts that got us ready. We won Biola. It was always that last little benchmark to check and see how we did. And we got to Springfield and it was cold. And so first time I saw like frozen grass and it was all crunchy sounding. But prior to going there, we were told, oh yeah, you got to wear like women's pantyhose because it's cold and you can wear them. So I remember, I think it might have been like Steve and John Koenig and I in the fall of 76 sheepishly go into a department store in a women's section. And we each described our sisters, and I don't have a sister, our sisters who are about as tall as us and weighed about as much as us. And what pantyhose would they wear? And that's what we did. So we each got a couple pair. So we doubled them. And we got to Springfield. We get into the starting line and pretty much everyone else is laughing at us. Because here we are with these black pantyhose and long sleeve shirts and a hoodie and the gardening gloves. We're all bundled up. Most of the guys from the area are just there in their tank tops and their shorts. And they're kind of laughing at us. I can't remember who it was, but it might have been someone like Mike Grehan or someone who later wrote for some magazines. But Mike was there as well. I remember he said everyone was laughing. He said until about a mile into the race and everyone stopped laughing. And that's the year that Eric, Steve, and I tied for first.
I don't even know. Do you remember the winning margin? The photos, I can't remember.
We're about 10, again, we were about 10 seconds ahead. And this year, it was a 10,000. I want to say we ran like 29:42, something in that area. But yeah, we took control early, and the three of us just rotated. And it was great to see Steve so strong to be able to stay with Eric and I. And we weren't slowing down for Steve. He was staying with us. So then we got to the finish line. I guess according to rules, they have to say there's a first, second, third. So we came across together and basically Steve immediately let Eric and I go. And then Eric pushes me forward. And later he would say, because you won your freshman year, now you have 2 wins. And so
nice.
That's the kind of people my teammates were. That's who they were.
Yeah. There's a lot of people from the East Coast and Pennsylvania who have listened to this or been on this show. So they would recognize the name Pete Heeson, ran into Pennsylvania at the same conference as IUP where I went to school. Did you race against him before Nationals?
It's the first time I ever met him. First time I ever saw him. But years later, fast forward years later, he would be on the Sub 4 track club with me. Quick little side note. And it's actually in the newspapers. I've only been stung by bees twice my entire life. I'm not allergic. My freshman year, minutes before the start of the cross-country NC2As, my freshman year, I feel something on my thumb. I look down and there's a bee stuck in my thumb. So I pull it out and everyone's, what's going on? And I said, oh, I just got stung. I said, but I'm not allergic, so it's okay. It's fine. Len comes over and thinking it's like a snake bite, it starts trying to suck the venom out of my thumb. And here we are at the start line of the NC2As. And it's okay. I'm not allergic. It's fine. Fast forward, Springfield, Missouri, NC2As again. As I'm running, I feel something pinching me, my backside. Finish the race. I reach down and I pull out this bee. I was stung by a bee again. My only 2 bee stings in my life were both at NC2A cross country meet.
What was the starting temperature? Below zero, right around
Oh yeah,
32?
because the grass was frozen.
Yeah, like 10 below or something.
Yeah, so that was
freezing. Yeah.
thing. I thought bees hibernated, but there it was. So the newspapers even wrote about it.
That's great. All right, let's get into your junior year and then the injury. This is new to you.
Absolutely. I'd never been hurt ever. I don't think I even ever had shin splints, which was pretty common then because the shoes are not what they became a few years later, or certainly not now. You're running in virtually no padding. And so shin splints are common. Your body's growing and all those things are happening, dynamics in your legs. But no, I didn't have any injuries. Get through 2 seasons. And then junior year is Eric's sophomore year in track. Eric starts to having some issues and he didn't really do well in NC2A's track his freshman year. And then I started feeling things happening, but I didn't have an injury. Come junior year, we have a time trial in track, 1500. It was maybe with a 300 to go and we weren't running especially fast, which then was probably like 4:10 pace with Steve. Felt a pinch in my calf. And that was the beginning of that seesaw with being healthy, being injured, being healthy. Unfortunately, Irvine didn't really have a trainer program to help us. So they literally would send me to Orange Coast Junior College because they had a really good trainer there that was actually on the Olympic training team, trainers. And so I would go there for sound treatments and all the other things. But it became a seesaw. I didn't really know what it was. I probably ran for a week or 2, not knowing. I thought it was a cramp. It was sore. And then eventually I realized what it was. And then we did the best we could, but we really didn't have a training program.
And what was the medical diagnosis? Was it a tear?
It was a tear in my soleus. Is that what it is? Gastrosoleus, gastrosoleus. Yeah, so had that. And then it went back and forth. And then, of course, what ends up happening is that I'm favoring the other leg. And then you started getting these alternate injuries. And that's what happened to me. So then my other calf goes. And then that was the rest of my career till I graduated. I got an Achilles problem, but it wasn't until after post-college. But so even I think my junior year, I ended up running my best mile. I ran 4:02, but it was up, on again, off again thing. My senior year, Steve graduated. But I remember I even went to the Drake Relays. Probably the best race of my college career track was the 1320 leg of the DMR, the distance medley. And I loved running the 1320 from my junior high school days. I loved that. Didn't have a problem because Steve was going to always anchor the mile leg. I'd gladly take the 1320 leg. And I think that I ran at Drake and I ran like a 2:53, which I was quite pleased with. And I was probably my best track race in my college career.
Yeah, that's great. You were in fine arts. What did you specialize in? Or what
Fine arts, I emphasized in painting and sculpture. And I did everything else, ceramics and everything else, which leads to where I'm at today. I mainly did drawing, painting. That was my emphasis, and then some sculpturing. I had a really good instructor, drawing and painting. So it was the same person. He was a LA artist, really famous. I just got along with him so well. And I took him every single time. Even if I didn't need to take any more units for that class, I would take him just because he was amazing. I even made contact with him years later after I started designing because I wanted to come by and say hello and thank him. His name was Ed Burrell. Ed Burrell was even hired by I think it was some kind of a motor department type stuff where he'd make signs or design signs for speeding limits or things like that. Government even got him, but he was really one of the first people that introduced me to video art. Then it was called guerrilla art because they would just go and videotape stuff, right? In old video machines. And it became known as guerrilla art, guerrilla videos. He introduced me to that as well. And then that's when I started thinking about my later career and what I wanted to do. Injured, so I have more time to take art classes in the rooms more often. Then I started hearing about punk rock and all this other stuff, and it fit my art because I didn't know what it was. I was doing broken glass and sharp objects and thinking I'm really radical and stuff like this. And Ed said, you should go up to LA and start checking out this music scene called punk rock. So I started doing that. I'd be up to Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Strip from Orange County, driving up there to do that. And then there were one or two clubs in Orange County, but most of the bands were there. They would always go there from overseas. That even inspired my art even more, which led to others later.
So we get our identities, and you have the identity of a successful runner, a competitor, a teammate, an artist, a student, all these things. And then there's a big pull with this injury to affect you. Sometimes you couldn't run, sometimes you weren't performing. What do you remember about that? Being injured or being unsure when you were going to get better? How'd that affect you?
Initially, when I first got hurt, like I mentioned, I didn't know what it was. Never been hurt before. I don't think a lot of people on the team, not in a bad way, but they just didn't believe that I was hurt. It was just really sore. From those 10 repeat miles, you're just really sore for 2 weeks. And then eventually it became that. It's like I said, I was up and down. I know it played with your minds because here I am. I could barely, I won PC Toys my junior year. And the next year, I was last on our team. I couldn't even score for our team. So it was that up and down thing. Like I said, the Drake Relays was an amazing race for me, but then a week later, I couldn't finish a 5,000. So it was that. So my last 2 years weren't really a lot of fun. I had some races that I enjoyed, and I loved the team. As far as my running was concerned, I really knew that at some point I'd have to take a break to see if it could mend up. And that's what I did. Once I graduated Irvine, my last race, I DNF'd. I didn't finish. And that was PC Toy. The 10,000 my senior year, I'd won it the previous year, beat Brian Hunsaker. I outsprinted Brian Hunsaker, my old roommate. He was at San Diego State. It was a hot Fresno day, our junior years. He runs 58 his last quarter. I run 54 and I win. It was a slower time. It was hot. The following year, I had to drop out because my calf was shot. So it was that extreme. So when I got out of college, Len had decided to leave Irvine, but I was able to finish my career with him because then he finished the same time I did at Irvine. He goes to Arizona with Steve and takes Ed Allmeyer with him and a couple other people. And I was done with college. I graduated, got my degree. I decided I just need to take a break and see if I can mend up. And I was already into road racing. I just figured, you know what? I think I'm going to start to shift over to road racing a bit more. But I did road racing since I was a sophomore in high school. I actually contacted my old high school coach, who was a UPS driver, still was. He was kind enough to say that he would meet me after work, maybe once or twice a week. And we're just going to do it quietly. No one even knows. Everyone just thinks I stepped aside. And I did. And so for probably 6 to 9 months, we'd work out, and he couldn't get off till later. So I would work out at night with him on the same routes that I did in high school. We'd meet at the old Loera High School. Then I'd do my little road workouts from there, and he'd time me because we knew the courses and distances and stuff like that. So he was quite kind, John Wells, to give me his time to be able to do that for a while, as long as he could. That's exactly what I did. Took off some time. And I think my first comeback race post-collegiately was a 10-mile. And it might have been in Azusa or Arcadia up in LA County. I remember I just felt like Superman. I couldn't run fast enough. My old teammate, John Koenig, was there working because he was a chiropractor. So he was working his table there. So he saw me. He was cheering me on. And I think I ran like 48, 45 just solo, just by myself. And then I knew that this was the right thing to do, to take off those months and months.
Yeah. And you weren't a miler anymore.
I was not a miler. I wasn't a miler since my second year at Irvine. I thought I was.
What was your ambition then? And we're all thinking 4-minute mile. You're thinking national champion. You've had records. The Olympics are certainly something that say, I got to get to the Olympics somehow, sometime. What was going on? What exactly, when was that? And with the Olympic boycott coming up, how did that make you think about what you would do with running?
Yeah, I knew, looking at the way things were going, I didn't think I was going to be back on the track other than maybe the 10,000. And that was a possibility, a question mark. I really thought, I think, here I am thinking I'm a miler. My freshman year, I got second behind Steve at NC2As. I get second in the 5,000 as a freshman. So as a freshman, I was the leading point scorer for UC Irvine.
Wow.
And we won
Yeah,
the
cool.
title. And I know, and then I run a couple of good races. I run 402, so I'm decent. But I realized if I'm going to be training myself or working with John Wells for as long as I can, it's going to most likely be the marathon or the 10,000. So that's what I started angling towards. I could do fartleks on the road for 10,000. I'd be on the track every now and then, but really I was on the roads training. After college, it was pretty much going to be a road, and it was going to probably be the marathon. So getting ready for 80, I still wasn't quite ready. I just knew I wouldn't be ready. So I just let 80 go by and just cheering on Steve and everyone else. But I knew for me that Olympics and 80 weren't going to be it. It was going to have to be 84. And that's when I started gearing towards that.
What happened with your calf during the training? You're 130 miles a week at UCI. What was your mileage for marathon training?
I have to be the first one to say it was ridiculously low. I just went back with John again, like I mentioned, and we just tried to figure, is there a way we can just do lower mileage and protect your legs and see what we can do? As it turns out, a couple of years later, the next year, 81, I'm pretty much training myself, talking to John, but he's so busy now. I'm just thinking, okay, I'm going to use his knowledge and he's going to inform me what to do. And then I'll just do it. I run my first marathon, and I had to jogged a couple in Western States, Culver City in college, right? After institute, but that was just for fun. Don't count those. Decided I'm going to run Boston 81. There was an Orange County marathon the previous winter here, call it winter. And it was the Orange County Masters. It was what it was called. And flat as it could be, I decided, okay, I just got to break 250. If I can break 250, I can do that. I can do that. My legs are holding up. I've been taking it easy. I had an enormous training schedule of 65 miles a week for a marathon. That is where I was at. And that had included probably a 16 or 18 mile run somewhere in that week. So that's what I was doing. I was still working either at sub 4. I started working there. We can talk about that in a second. And I was working at the number one core running shop ever in Orange County is Lochorn's for Runners, named after John Lochorn, the runner from New Jersey who came out. So that's what I'm doing. I'm getting ready for Boston. I'm going to run sub 250. I'm training with someone. Howard Burgess is my teammate, and he was a college competitor from Long Beach State. Got together. We're running, training together. He's going to try to do the same thing. Halfway through, I tell him, I'm feeling pretty good. Is it okay if I take off? And he goes, yeah. And I don't even know if I'm in the top 10. I end up getting second place, and I run 224. And I'm thinking, I didn't even try to run hard till like after. So I think I'm going to break 220. And so in Boston in April, get all the plans ready. Maybe I up my mileage another 5 miles per week. Now I'm at maybe 70 miles, running a lot of 10Ks, road races, getting ready, doing this, doing that. And get to Boston, I'm now running for sub 4. We had quite a good track team, road racing team. 81, Boston. I went to the Elliott Lounge in Boston, right? The famous Elliott Lounge everyone goes to. And there's Bill Rogers, and there's all these different runners. And this is amazing. I forgot who it was, but one of the headline runners comes up and knew me and says, what are you doing? And I'm going to try to break 217. That's my plan. And he says, what are your workouts been like? So I tell him, and he's like, wow, it's a bit low, but okay. And tell him some of the road races I've been running and so on and so forth. And he said, you're going to run under 217. And I'm thinking, oh, this is great. He knows what he's talking about. He's run way faster than I could. I end up running 2:14.16 and I get 18th place. And what's also important was that my punk rock phase, I run with a mohawk that I got specially for the race. Bob Wishnia from Runner's World laid claim that I now had the world's record in the Mohawk Marathon. Not that I had many challengers, not that anyone cares to challenge that, but I did have that world record.
That's great. Did you have any teammates in that Boston race at 81?
Yes. I had Lou Patterson. We ran 2:16. It was amazing. And even better, because I was working at Sub 4, I wasn't designing for them yet, and that's what I wanted to do. But I was pushing the broom, I was cutting material, I was packing orders. Eventually, I was working in customer service. You just did anything you could. It was a small company, but we loved it. All the Irvine guys basically became Sub 4 runners. He had an instant track and cross country team that was quite famous. So that's what we did. But Tom Wysocki was working there. George Mason didn't live too far away, who ran for Athletes in Action, AIA. Super nice guy. He was from Kansas, but he was out here. So we'd always battle on road races. We became training partners. And George was going to run the marathon too, Boston 81. Tom had no interest, but he was a fantastic 10,000. He could do anything. He could run it if he wanted. But we would go out for these runs. To this day, we talk about the fact that we would run anywhere from 6 miles to maybe 13, 14 miles down to the ocean, because that's how close we were, and then back along a flat riverbed. That's all it was, is flat. And we were probably running faster than we did in some road races, just because there was Tom, there was George. And we always joked about it, because later there was an article afterwards, after Boston, and they described the fact that here it was, a punk rocker, being me, Tom Wysocki, this rock and roll guy with long blonde hair, and George Mason, who, toted a Bible with him. And these 3 guys that should not be training together, here we are training together. And it was great. And to this day, we still talk about the fact that those workouts really helped all 3 of us. And George himself ended up running 2:16 as well. It was like this group that I was training with was doing amazing. And we all went our own ways. Tom had a great 84 Olympic trials in the 10,000. And George and I had some great road races as well. So
thinking about the whole decade when you started in the 60s and then through the 70s, certainly in parts of America, if we're out running on the roads, sometimes cars would throw beer cans at you. They think you're joining in the Army. And then there's you 3 running Olympic trial pace out on the roads. Did you have any of that? What was the culture out in that coast in terms of recreational runners?
Yeah, especially from the beginning, say junior high school for sure. And then a few years after that, post-collegiately. Yeah, there was certainly that. I never got anything thrown at me per se, but a whole lot of words came my way. And that was very common, trying to be sarcastic and so on and so forth. So yeah, there was a lot of that. And I think maybe the worst thing that ever happened to me, it was actually by accident. At the time, I was still living in Anaheim and working for Sub 4. And I would go on these runs, and I would always go by Disneyland. Since I was in junior high school, I ran by Disneyland all the time. One particular hot summer, just shoes and shorts, I'm running. And there's a family on the sidewalk. So I decide, okay, and I'm coming behind them, going the same direction. I better move and just step into the curb and gutter, and I can do that. As I do, the man of the family turns and just spit. Not at me.
Oh,
He didn't know I was coming behind him so fast. Splashes right across my chest. And I thought, you know what? I'm really sweaty. I'm just going to get to the nearest gas station. And that's what I did. But that was by no means planned by him. That was just a pure accident. But that was the only time that anything came my way.
Yeah.
But that's what we had.
Okay, 2:14, a little bit of a bonus surprise on the time. What goes next in your mind there? What's the plan? You're 3 years away from Olympics, but there's plenty of marathoning to do.
Yeah. Even then, I knew that I didn't want to really run more than 2 marathons a year if I had to. And then if you remember, at that era, the 83 Boston is well known because of the depth relative to the times in the world. Because of that, what I realized was it seemed like when I was in junior high school to high school, watching these guys, Frank Sorter or other people like that, move into the marathon, it was almost like you're saying your career's coming to an end. And that's where you're going to go. And so be it. But now, and when I got into it, it seemed like Salazar's of the world, Rudy Chappas of the world, Dave Murphy's of the world, everyone who still has a full career ahead of them was going to run a marathon. And then they're going to go back to track. But I had no intentions on going back. I just was going to continue. So because of that, all of a sudden, you have guys like Rod Dixon, who was an Olympic 1,500 meter runner, is running a marathon. You have Greg Meyer, who's broken 4 minutes, winning Boston, and so on and so forth. All of a sudden, I was 4:02, and here I am running a 2:14. You have guys with crazy speed, Rudy Chappa, and just crazy speed running a marathon and then going back to the shorter distances. That was the era that I think really dropped times, because now you had people who had years in their career to go were trying to run a fast marathon.
Yeah. Okay. And you went to next big one was New York. Did you have anything in between Boston and New York?
Yeah. So what ended up happening is that I intended to run the 82 Boston as my second marathon. It didn't happen. I started developing plantar fascia. So be it. So I had that to deal with, and I got through it. And I had a really good podiatrist here who was also on the Olympic coaching team. That was taken care of, but I had to be careful still. So I just waited, and I couldn't run Boston a year later. What ended up happening was that I decided I got invited to run the Stockholm Marathon. And Stockholm was, I want to say in June, I traveled there, and I remember that was like my first international trip because of my ability. I'm not making the national team, but just being invited.
Yeah.
So I made a deal with the meet promoter to fly me through London because I was still into my music. That's England. I got to see England. I got to be there. I got to get my Doc Martens. I got to get all these other things, which is going to link in later. So here I am taking all of my friends' money that we can scrape together because we had no money. I came back with 6 pair of Doc Marten boots because they're hard to find in the US. And that's what I did. Stockholm Marathon. I get there, and I knew a couple of runners who were also there. Mike Pinocchi, who was right behind me in Boston. I think he had run faster than me anyways, but he was there. It was really hot. I think by 20 miles, I'm foaming at the armpits. I'm salting around my chest, and I know I'm going down. And I start cramping. And it's going to finish in the Olympic Stadium. I think I'm in 7th place, 7th, 8th place top. And so I decide if I'm going to start cramping, I'm going to have to stop and massage my leg. I don't want to cramp on the track in the Olympic ancient facility. So that's what I did. I basically stopped at the gates, massaged my legs, finished the lap on the track. And I think I ran like 2:24 and got, I think, 7th place, but it was a hot day. Eric Stahl at the time was the well-known Swedish runner, and he ended up winning the race, and he ran 2:16. For him to run that fast, I couldn't believe it.
I just happened to be there on the day of the marathon about 2007. And I just set up a little table and handed out beers to the people in the back. So I didn't even see the whole race, but we were just passing through. But yeah, it's a hot day. I don't know, man. I think it's always hot there, Jim.
Yeah, it was beautiful, but it was just, and I love the Olympic training, the Olympic stadium, the finish there.
The setting.
Only time I ever finished a marathon on a track like that are normally held for world championships or Olympics. So that was really fun. It was really fun.
I think Athens finishes inside the stadium there and on the track. Yeah, too. Okay. After Stockholm, not a great experience. What happened?
Stockholm, like I said, is the summer. Even though it was only a few months away, I was going to run New York, my first New York. And that's what I planned on. That's what I did. And again, thinking I want to break my PR, 2:14:16, to see what I can do. And ran faster the first 10 miles, did all that. And it just didn't happen. But I placed better because in Boston, I placed 18th. New York, I only run 6 seconds slower. So I run 2:14:22. I finished 11th. So it was a legit time for a good field. And to me, it's so amazing. Both marathons have their own unique personality. Boston is historic. I mean, they're so educated on the sidelines of watching you run and know everything. New York was such an amazing, it was like an event, right? There was an event starting on the Verrazano Bridge, Statue of Liberty is off to the side. You have all these fireboats shooting water. You got helicopters with banners flying all over the place. And then they start this race. And like then, maybe there were 15,000 runners and something like that in 82. And just to have 30,000 feet pounding the Verrazano Bridge. And you got like almost 2 miles on this bridge before you hit the street. So it was awesome. And going through Central Park. And what ended up happening, one of my training partners, Armando Sendejas, one of the guys who did not come to UC Irvine, became one of my training partners. So he and I were winning most of the races, the road races in Orange County. So we decided, let's just get together. We were rivals, but let's help each other. And so that's what we did. So I went out a little bit fast, that 82 New York, faded a bit. And then in Central Park, all of a sudden, Armando comes with 2 other guys. And I believe at some point we realized one was from Spain, one was from Germany, I think. We didn't know them. So they passed me, and I just decided I got to hang on to them. If I fade now, I'm going to continue fading for these last 4 miles to the finish. So that's what they did. We got together, and then we remembered, both Armando and I talked about the fact that if there's prize money for this, we started seeing each other like one of those drumsticks in a cartoon where the 2 guys see each other and they see each other as drumsticks because they're starving to death. Same thing, but we saw each other as dollar signs. And it was awesome because then that really gave me my second win. I end up leaving all 3 of those guys, even though they caught me at the finish. I finished 11th, 2:14:16. Armando in his first marathon runs 2:15 flat. So he ran an amazing race for his first marathon. And he was my teammate, just out of necessity. And so that 82 marathon was a really good one for me.
Yeah. You finished 11th. At that point, you're going to be invited back anytime you want to go. What else up to that point was happening with money? We'd passed the Cascade runoff, big event. What was happening with you and appearance fees or prize money?
I really wasn't getting much. I think I got a little bit of a stipend because I was on the sub-4 track team, even though I was working, and eventually I became the designer there. And that was great. But it was definitely just minimal. And I wasn't like Steve. I wasn't a draw like Steve, but I was getting equipment. I got equipment when I was a junior in high school. Puma and Adidas approached me as a 17-year-old at the Russian meet in Austin, Texas. And they basically just said, here's a bunch of shoes. Wear them if you can. If you don't, wear them next time, because they knew that was a couple of days of racing right then and there. I ended up choosing Puma. I stayed with Puma all through that last year of high school and all through college. I actually got Steve and John Koenig sponsored by Puma because we knew Art Simberg. Art Simberg was the candy man back then with all the equipment and stuff. That we would get all of our equipment from him up at Mulholland Drive in Hollywood. We'd go up there a couple times a season. We get to know all the UCLA guys, all the USC guys, because we all did the same thing. Went up to Art's house, help him organize his new shipment in his garage. Then we could take our seasonal stuff. So we got to know guys like that. So really, I was just making a few dollars here and there. There wasn't really no appearances for me. So no, I wasn't on that list per se. But if there was any money for the big races, then I would benefit from that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to up through 84. What happened after New York and then looking towards Olympic trials?
After 82 in New York, I got invited. I ran Boston, didn't do as good in Boston in 83. But Boston, even Amby Burfoot talks about the 83 Boston because it was so deep relative to the world. And it was crazy. And I think I ran 2:16 and change, and I finished like 35th. So I still ran a decent time, but I faded, went out a little bit too hard. Training was going well. I just went out too hard. Because of that, I qualified for the Olympic trials for the next year. So Boston was the first race in 83 that qualified you for 84 Olympic trials. And so that qualified me. So I was good to go. Because of that, I got invited that summer of 83 to go up to the Olympic training facilities. And we were basically going to be guinea pigs. So Tony Sandoval was there. John Tuttle was there. I was there. Pinocchi was there. And then a few of the other American guys, there were maybe 6 or 8 of us. And they would just basically use this as laboratory.
Shake out the system. Yeah, there.
Yeah. And they were doing like VO2 max. They were doing checking to see what our anaerobic threshold was by taking blood out before, put us on a treadmill, run us till we fell off, and then take more blood. And then they could tell us where we were and dunk us in the water, do the body fat percentage. And I remember when we did the exhausting blood test, I was right after Tony Sandoval, who had already won the Olympic trials in 80. I'm watching him after about 20 minutes just falter. And your electrodes, you got this big mouthpiece in for VO2 max, and you're all wired up. And I see him fall, because then the treadmill goes higher and faster. And I see him fall off thinking, oh my gosh, if this Olympic marathon U.S. trial champ looks like that, what am I going to look like?
That's great. Do you remember, did they do lactic?
Yes, because they'll take the blood out before and then afterwards, and then they could tell you what your levels were and things like this. And I still above my pay grade, but it was really interesting. And I just thought, this is going to be the future, but you need to be around that facility or one like it all the time. Because then they would explain, we can tell if you're on the verge of being injured by certain things that we're testing. I just thought it was amazing. I just thought this is probably what the East Germans did when they had that whole Cold War going on, and the Eastern Bloc. That's what they talk about, all these scientific tests. I just thought this is going to be the future. But you need the facilities constantly, because you can change from one day to the next. But I enjoyed that. And I got to know all the guys and that stuff. And it was a lot of fun. So I enjoyed that. That was the summer of 83. And then, of course, I go back to New York in 83 as well. So I had the 2 marathons, Boston and New York in 83. Again, I just went out too hard. I was fit. I was ready to go. And I knew I could break 2:12 for sure. I decided if I come by in 50 minutes, I'm set. I want to really shoot for 2:11. And I passed 10 miles and Rod Dixon's there. And Jeff Smith, I think, was the other one, that famous photo and the famous finish. I just remember, I think I came through like in 48:45 or something. And I'm just thinking, oh no, I'm a minute too fast and I can't do anything about it. So I just went backwards. And what ends up happening, 83 New York, I'm fading, get to Central Park, and maybe you have about 4 miles to go or so. I remember Rudy Chapa passes me. He ends up running 2:12. And then Dave Murphy. So all these people are passing me. And I finally get halfway through the park and I think I'm done. I start walking and people are yelling, don't walk, that whole thing. And rightfully so. I'm looking for a path across Central Park to get to the finish line by walking. I'm going to quit. Then I realize this is going to take me longer than if I just jog and walk to the finish on the course. So that's what I ended up doing. I jogged and walked the last 4 miles, and I still ran 2:18. So I was on pace for that 2:12 for sure.
Really? Yeah.
But 22 miles is not a marathon. So
by 84, what was going on with sub 4?
Yeah, I eventually became the designer. And so through 83, 84, of course, everyone's at the Olympic trials, at the Coliseum. Tom Steiner, the owner, very smart guy. He had figured out he could rent like someone's abandoned dirt lot across from the Coliseum and very diminished cost. And we could set up sub 4 booth. And we did exactly that. It was awesome. He got us some tickets, so I got to see the 10,000 and the 1,500. And so it was awesome. So I was working there doing all this stuff. And somehow By this point, Sub 4 has moved to San Diego. So we're in Oceanside, which is North County, San Diego. Because they knew I was into the music scene and the club scene and stuff, checking all these new things. They said, we want entertainment at our booth. Don't know what it is. Maybe it's a magician. Maybe it's a band. Maybe it's something. At the time, I was really getting into all the break dancers and stuff. I wasn't a break dancer per se, but I was really interested in that culture. I would take some weekends and go up to LA, the clubs in LA that I knew, and I started putting flyers out for Sub 4 entertainers, and we're going to have an audition. And so one of the marketing people came up with me to LA, which is a bit of a drive, and we had a full day of bands, of magicians, of dancers, and I wanted a breakdancing crew. And that's what we ended up with. I think it was called the LA Poppers and Lockers. And they were awesome. We had a booth across, and we had a little stage across from the Coliseum. Tom Steiner asked me, what do the guys need? I said, they need linoleum. But forget the cardboard. That's if we're just makeshift. But they also like lino, so linoleum. Then I got the idea, I'm going to customize the linoleum floor, and I'm going to put the Sub 4 logo in it. Black and white, as it was. We had plenty of time, but it took me a day to make this big pattern, and I had to cut out the letters, both the white and the black, that were going to match together. And it looked awesome. It was Sub 4 and the breakdancers came out. And strangely enough, which leads later, I got Etonic to sponsor us. And they actually had boxing boots and stuff like this. Our breakdancers, Poppers and Lockers, were wearing Etonic wind gear, because everyone at that moment in time was wearing like windbreakers and stuff to break dance. And then I got them the Etonic shoes to match. But they really were wearing all our Sub 4 clothing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Did that get photographed? Did that get recorded?
yeah, I have some photos. I'll send them to you. But I didn't get recorded, but I have a bunch of photos of the crew. And then I moved up. I was designing for them. And then 83, 84. And towards the end of 84, I decided I was going to leave. And just by chance, Angel Martinez, who was one of the All-Americans in the 76 NCAA cross-country title that we won. He was there for UC Davis, All-American. He was one of our salesmen. And he said, Ralph, you should be designing shoes. And he said, I'm carrying Reeboks. And maybe you should think about joining Reebok and try to design for them. So didn't happen overnight, but that was the seed that was planted for me to think about designing shoes.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.